What it do, chooms? Welcome back to SPACEJB. I'm your host, Space, aka Space Sabora Arasaka. With most of the playable events in Cyberpunk 2077 happening on Earth in Night City, it is easy for one to look past some of the subtle as well as the more on-the-nose references to a whole nother world that exists right above V's head. In the famed RPG, there are more than enough references towards mythological creatures, as well as religious aspects, from angels and demons to vampires and aliens. With that being said, it is fun to acknowledge the fact that aliens do exist in the world of Cyberpunk, yet they may not look like what you think. And in this video, I will uncover these aliens of Cyberpunk, which in my opinion might be the coolest society that exists in the Cyberpunk lore. And before we get into this video, if you are a huge Cyberpunk fan like myself or are just intrigued by this type of content, then don't forget that Papa Space here is subliminally conditioning you without your knowledge like Mr. Blue Eyes. That way you go ahead and click that like button and subscribe to the channel with the notification bell on. That way you don't miss out on any of my Cyberpunk content. You really don't have a choice. I control you.
Seems to be some sort of problem.
Everything seems to be in order.
Everything seems to be in order.
When mentioning the term alien, you might think about gray or green beings that come from another planet, who have giant heads, long gangly fingers, though in the Cyberpunk universe, this term is actually used to describe a group of people who are either born in space or spend most of their time working off-planet. Those who fall under this umbrella are also referred to as Highriders, which this term Highriders is actually a derogatory slang term given to them by those who reside on Earth, or who are referred to as Earthsiders. Very similar to most alien lores, especially from movies and texts, these off-planet natives were highly intelligent, and that is a direct result of their great education system, which I must say was out of this world. Before the time of 2077, the generations prior, back in 2016, were merely excited and ambitious technologists that were roped in by the European Space Agency, or ESA, using practically sales pitches or catchphrases like, "We'll open the door to the universe," and "the solar system home to all." The goal was to start the second step in colonizing the cosmos by building the O'Neill stations. These massive orbital stations would not only house life, but would also contain full ecosystems, rivers, trees, and they all would contain a window system that could help let in and block out sunlight, creating an effective day and night cycle. The construction of these stations were massive feats of engineering in themselves, yet unfortunately for the Highriders workforce, the conditions were less than ideal. As soon as they left Earth, they had their expectations shattered, their freedom was ripped away, and they were strong-armed into working ridiculously inhumane hours. On top of that they were working in the most extremely dangerous conditions and environment known to man. There was no real R&R given to these volunteers who basically were just ambitious to get out into space and build something substantial. Also, just to make sure that the work got done under these conditions, they were doled out hard punishments if anybody dared defied it, or tried to slack off. The ESA would ensure that there were guards on standby similar to a prison unit to make sure that these people stayed in line. Even peaceful protests was met with just straight up violence and excessive use of force by these guard units. The ESA was taking strict advantage of the fact that there was no worker laws or any laws of any kinds out in space. They were just seemingly trying to break these people's spirit and work them to the bone. The abuse from the ESA and the EEC would reach its boiling point on September 29th of 2022. The Highrider colonists had enough of their station masters in these guards' heavy hands, and also having a real fear of just being collateral damage of a raging ground war between Arasaka and Militech started to rise. The citizens of O'Neill too would carry out an effective and cleverly staged coup of the entire station, outnumbering the guards a staggering 40-1, and knowing that there wasn't enough firepower to stop their uprising would ensure their victory. Once they took over and had control of O'Neill 1 as well as O'Neill 2, they used the new artillery from O'Neill 2 to unleash a barrage of newly built firepower. Now being able to flex a little muscle and showcase this display of force, they would go on to destroy multiple essential ESA and EEC facilities, everything from earthbound defenses to orbital weapons that were owned by corporations. The one thing that I find funny is that for the people who was running the show, for the months that they caused so much suffering, it only took these very intelligent people only 7 hours to get their freedom. And the timing for them to do this couldn't have been more nova. With the increasing war on the ground stretching all the defenses pretty thin, left there no real worry of immediate retaliation, and this would become known as the 7-Hour War. Soon after the war, the colonists of O'Neill 2 would declare their independence and taking no allegiance towards any side, claiming a more neutral stance in regards to the war happening on Earth. With the colonists of O'Neill 2 having all that power and no ties to anyone, you saw Japan and the USA trying to gain their love and support just to use that for themselves. The Confederation, after whooping a whole lot of ass, would eventually take over the remaining lunar cities Tycho and Copernicus, forcing the ESA's influence out of orbit. Yet it is said that the ESA still has ownership of the orbital casino Crystal Palace. After everything was said and done and those 7 hours were up, them claiming their liberated freedoms would now make the Highrider Confederation the first nations established outside of Earth. For them, this meant that they got to establish their own societal as well as cultural identity. And due to the Pan-African negotiations between the ESA and EEC, a lot of this is founded on the back of African folklore, then later evolved thanks to the incorporation of Asian and European influences. In my mind, due to the trauma that they all experienced and overcame together, this laid the foundation for them to be more inclusive and accepting of their diverse nature, yet also allowing them to remain a very close-knit group of people. And I do mean close. Most of the time, if you get into a fight, you most likely will end up fighting all of these people.
I don't believe you people.
Huh? What do you mean, you people?
What do you mean, you people?
With that being said, it is to note that the Highriders are pretty hard to piss off, and are more known for their intellect as well as their calm-headed nature. Taking their education very seriously, most of the society is multilingual, and over time would develop their own dialect that would be known as the Word. This is basically the orbital version of street slang, and is a combination of African, German, French, and Japanese components. Though these people are pretty level-headed, if provoked, are also known to become your worst nightmare, and thanks to the things that they experienced during the 7-Hour War, it made them not so particular on outsiders or any stranger for that matter. Also, they can be a bit aggressive towards unknown spacecrafts that are not given permission to approach their orbital stations. For the nation in orbit, life in space has had its effects on the generations that were born after the 7-Hour War. The generations following were born with traits and genetic adaptations that were designed for life in 0G, helping improve their tolerance to radiation as well as low air pressure. Orbital life for them meant that they also were slightly weaker physically compared to those on Earth, though what they lacked in strength they made up for by being kick-ass martial artists who definitely relied on their cunning and stamina. Guns were also a no-no in space. Obviously, you don't want to fire a bullet, puncture a hole in a window, and end up like this. Yeah, so most of their people are experts with knives versus firepower. Highriders also prefer to turn their noses down on most of the earthly vices like alcohol, drugs, and smoking. Living in these massive pressurized containers, you don't have the luxury of open air ventilation like you would on Earth. Even with the increase in pollution, Earth still doesn't have a system that's governed by a computer. Not to mention, smoking a doobie in space could have catastrophic effects on their ventilation system as well as electrical components. Due to their disadvantage in size and strength, drugs and alcohol they feel seriously slows down their reflexes. And allowing this wouldn't just be risking one life, more so it would spell zeroed for everyone living on any of these orbital stations. This isn't to say that the Highriders don't have their own vices and addictions, and nothing gets these jokers more aerial than brain dances. Think about it, with the whole culture of folks deciding to remain in space 24/7 year-round, the concepts of experiencing different places and sensations must be rampant, and they have a whole society that dedicates its time to curating gaming simulations and competitions for these different groups. As far as substance use is concerned, choosing to use things like nitrous oxide or other aerosols that provide more of a stimulant rather than a depressant that you would see commonly used on Earth. When it comes to implants, these aliens are more keen on using bioware in combination with cyberware versus just going cyberware only. Subtlety and low risk is the name of the Highrider game. For those who don't know the difference between bioware and cyberware, I'll just sum it up for you real quickly here. Bioware is just the enhancements that are based off of the human anatomy and physiology. They just improve what's already the biological function versus replacing it entirely with technology and machinery. Cybernetics that are built on Earth are problematic to those who use them in space, due to the fact that they are not equipped with enough shielding to account for all the radiation bombardment that happens out in orbit. Also, in space, they don't have an electromagnetic field that could heavily reduce any chances of EMPs frying their systems. It is said that for every week that you spend in orbit, there is a 10% increase in a cybernetic malfunction. That's why most of their implants are built in orbital factories that have special shielding that accounts for all of these risks. BioWare is chosen over cyberware with the Highriders also because of the fact that it doesn't have much impact on their appearance, which is great for stealth, and with nanotech being the foundation of most BioWare, you don't run the risk of going cyber psycho if you stack a bunch of these in one body. Though one of the real downsides to BioWare is that they tend not to be as strong or as powerful as their cybernetic counterparts. And I know what all you cybernauts are out there thinking right now. Yo, Space, why the heck are these aliens your favorite society in Cyberpunk? There are a few reasons, though I guess you can call me a gonk for a good old-fashioned comeback story. A triumphant hero's tale, and the Highriders sure do have that. Starting off as ambitious workers, being tricked into years of slavery, then managing to overthrow their oppressors and create their own nation, putting them in a position of power and also allowing them to checkmate any of their outside oppositions who would think of attacking them. Going from being stripped down and practically having nothing to now running most of the operations that happen out in orbit. And if you think about the Crystal Palace is sponsored by Orbital Air, which is a mega corporation that is founded out of Nairobi, Kenya. And if you remember back to the region and location of where the original workers came from, and you will understand why this is a very important tidbit. By 2077, Orbital Air has a monopoly on any transportations of goods and passengers that are going into orbit. Most companies, if not all companies, damn near rely on their services, which in my opinion gives them like the coolest rags to riches story. They went from being workers and slaves to practically owning space at this point, which is one of the dopest things ever in Cyberpunk 2077. And now I get to leave it up to you, my chooms. What do y'all think about the Highriders or aliens of Cyberpunk 2077? Let me know in the comments below. Thank y'all again for clicking this video. If you made it this far, don't forget to hit that thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any of my content. And on top of that, don't forget to show yourself gratitude from time to time for just existing, because you know Papa Space is out there sending you nothing but good vibrations and love. I hope y'all take care of yourself. Thank y'all again, and I'll catch y'all on my next video. Let's take off. I'm out. Peace.